My name is Margaret, and I'm 58 years old. I never thought I'd be sitting alone in my small apartment on Thanksgiving evening, staring at my phone and wondering why my own family hadn't called. But that's exactly where I found myself last year. For 35 years, I worked as a librarian at our town's public library. It wasn't a glamorous job, but I loved it. I loved helping children discover their first favorite book, helping students with their research, and creating a warm space where anyone could come and feel welcome. My salary was modest, but it was enough for me. I lived simply, found joy in small things, and never felt the need to chase after wealth or status. My younger brother Richard, on the other hand, took a very different path. He went into finance, made smart investments, and by his mid-40s, he was quite wealthy. He married a woman named Vanessa, who came from money, and together they built a life filled with country club memberships, luxury cars, and a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Richard and Vanessa had 2 children, a son named Christopher, who was 28 and worked at his father's investment firm, and a daughter named Ashley, who was 25 and spent most of her time planning charity galas that seemed more about being seen than actually helping people. For years, our family gathered for every holiday. Our parents had passed away when Richard and I were in our 42nds, and we'd promised each other we'd keep the family traditions alive. Christmas was always the biggest celebration. We'd gather at Richard's large home, exchange gifts, share a meal, and for a few hours, the differences in our lives didn't seem to matter. But things started changing about 3 years ago. The comments became more frequent. Vanessa would mention how nice it must be to have so much free time, implying that my job wasn't real work. Christopher would talk about his bonuses and career moves, then look at me with something like pity when I didn't have similar stories to share. Ashley stopped asking about my life altogether. Richard changed too, or maybe he just stopped hiding what he'd always thought. He started making jokes about my small apartment, my older car, my simple clothes. They weren't mean exactly, but they stung. He'd laugh and say he was just teasing, that I was too sensitive. Last year, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I called Richard to ask what time I should arrive for dinner. We always did Thanksgiving at his house, and I'd been looking forward to it. I'd even found a beautiful vintage book of poetry at an estate sale that I planned to give him. Richard used to love poetry when we were young. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. I could hear voices and laughter in the background. "Margaret," he said, and something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "I was actually going to call you." "Oh, good," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I wanted to confirm what time you'd like me there on Thursday." There was a pause, longer than comfortable. "About that," Richard said. "Vanessa and I have been talking, and we've decided to keep this year's gathering a bit smaller. Just immediate family." I felt confused. "But Richard, I am immediate family. I'm your sister." Another pause. I heard a door close, and the background noise disappeared. He must have moved to another room. "Margaret, listen, I'm just going to be honest with you because I think you deserve that." His voice had taken on that tone he used when explaining things to people he thought were slow to understand. "Our children are at important points in their lives. Christopher is about to make partner, and Ashley is dating a very successful attorney. They're moving in circles where connections and impressions matter. I don't understand what that has to do with Thanksgiving dinner," I said, though a cold feeling was spreading through my chest. Richard sighed, like I was making this difficult. "You're my sister, and I care about you. But let's be realistic. You're almost 60, you've worked the same low-level job your entire life. You live in that tiny apartment, you drive a car that's falling apart. It's just not the image we're trying to project right now." I couldn't speak. I literally could not form words. "This is a time for winners," Richard continued. "People who've made something of themselves. People who can contribute to meaningful conversations about success and achievement. And Margaret, I'm sorry, but there's just no place for losers at our table this year." Losers. My own brother had called me a loser. "Richard," I finally managed to say, my voice shaking. I'm your sister, and you always will be, he said quickly. This isn't permanent, it's just while the kids are establishing themselves. Once they're settled, things can go back to normal. But for now, it's probably better if you sit out the holiday gatherings. You understand? It wasn't a question. He'd already decided. What about Christmas? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Let's just take it one holiday at a time, he said. Look, I've got to go. We have guests arriving. Take care of yourself, Margaret. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding my phone, trying to process what had just happened. My brother, the person I'd grown up with, shared a bedroom with when we were small because our family couldn't afford a bigger house. The person I'd helped with homework and supported through every challenge had just uninvited me from Thanksgiving because I wasn't successful enough. Because I was a loser. I spent Thanksgiving alone. I told myself it was fine, that I was used to my own company. I ate a small turkey breast, watched old movies, and tried not to think about my family, gathered around Richard's long dining table without me. The days after Thanksgiving were hard. I kept waiting for Richard to call, to apologize, to say he'd made a mistake, but my phone stayed silent. A week before Christmas, I decided to reach out. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe Richard had been having a bad day. Maybe the holidays would be different. I called him on a Saturday morning. Vanessa answered. Margaret, she said, her voice cool. How are you? I'm well, thank you. Is Richard available? He's playing golf. Can I help you with something? I took a deep breath. I was hoping to talk about Christmas. I know Thanksgiving was complicated, but I thought maybe we could all be together for Christmas. It's always been such an important holiday for our family. Vanessa made a sound that might have been a laugh. Oh, Margaret, you really don't understand, do you? This isn't about one holiday. Richard has finally realized that we need to be more selective about our associations. Your lifestyle choices reflect poorly on our family's reputation. My lifestyle choices? I repeated. You mean my job? The fact that I'm not wealthy? I mean your complete lack of ambition, Vanessa said, her voice sharp now. You're nearly 60 years old, and what do you have to show for your life? No husband, no children, no property, no achievements worth mentioning. You spent your entire life around books instead of making something of yourself. Richard has worked too hard to build this family's name to have it dragged down by association with someone who settled for so little. Each word was like a slap. I felt tears burning in my eyes. I love my work, I said quietly. I've helped thousands of people over the years. I've made a difference in my community. That's exactly the kind of thinking that's kept you poor, Vanessa said. You mistake poverty for virtue. Well, the rest of us live in the real world, where success matters. Now I really must go. We have a party to prepare for. Do take care. She hung up. I sat in my living room as December snow fell outside my window, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to call again. If my family didn't want me, then I would spend Christmas alone. I would survive this, just like I'd survived other hard things in my life. But I'll admit, it hurt more than I wanted to acknowledge. I caught myself crying at odd moments, while shelving books at work, while grocery shopping, while trying to fall asleep at night. The rejection cut deep, down to places I didn't know could still be wounded. Christmas week arrived. The library was decorated with lights and garlands that I'd helped hang. Children came in excited about their school breaks. Everyone seemed full of joy and anticipation, and I wore my best smile while inside I felt hollow. On Christmas Eve, I was working the closing shift. It was nearly 8 p.m., and I was about to lock up when a young woman rushed in. She looked frantic, close to tears. Please, she said. I know you're closing, but I desperately need help. Come in, I said immediately, holding the door open. What do you need? Her name was Sarah, and she was 32 years old. She explained that she'd just gotten custody of her 8-year-old nephew, a boy named Tommy whose parents had died in a car accident 3 months earlier. Tomorrow would be their first Christmas together, and she'd promised Tommy they'd read a special story, a book his mother used to read to him every Christmas Eve. "But I can't find it anywhere," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face now. "I've been to every bookstore in town. It's out of print, and Tommy keeps asking about it, and I don't know what to do. He's already lost so much." "Tell me the title," I said. She did, and I knew the book. It was indeed out of print. A small publisher from the 1980s. But I also knew that our library had a copy in our archives, books we kept for historical purposes that weren't in regular circulation. "Wait here," I told Sarah. I went into our basement archives, searched through boxes, and found it. The book was worn, its cover faded, but intact. I brought it upstairs. "We can't normally loan these out," I said, "but I'm going to make an exception. Consider this a long-term loan. Keep it as long as Tommy needs it." Sarah stared at the book, then at me, then burst into fresh tears. "Thank you," she sobbed. "You have no idea what this means. Tommy has been so sad, so lost, and this is one thing, just one small thing from his old life that I can give him." She hugged me, the stranger, right there in the library entrance. And something shifted in my heart. This was why I did this work. This moment, this connection, this small act of help that meant everything to someone who needed it. "Merry Christmas," I told her as she left, clutching the book like treasure. "Merry Christmas," she called back. "You're an angel." I locked up the library and walked to my car through the softly falling snow. I sat there for a moment, engine running, heater warming the cold interior. And I realized something. Richard was wrong. Vanessa was wrong. I wasn't a loser. I had spent my life in service to my community, helping people, making small differences that added up to something meaningful. I had lived according to my values, and there was nothing shameful in that, more than that. I realized I didn't need their approval. For years I'd been making myself smaller, apologizing for my choices, feeling inadequate because I hadn't pursued wealth or status. But I liked my life. I liked who I was. And I was done feeling ashamed. I drove home, made myself a simple dinner, and spent Christmas Eve reading by my small Christmas tree. It wasn't the family celebration I'd always known, but it was peaceful. And in that peace, I started to heal. Christmas morning, I woke early. I'd planned to spend the day quietly, maybe go for a walk in the park, come home and watch some old movies. I was okay with that plan, but at 9 a.m., my phone rang. It was my brother Richard. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. "Margaret," he said, and his voice sounded strange. "Tight. We need to talk." "About what?" "Can you come over, please? It's important." Something in his tone worried me. Despite everything, he was still my brother. "Is everyone all right? Is someone hurt?" "No one's hurt. Just please come." I drove to Richard's house, that enormous place with its perfect landscaping and 3-car garage. I'd been here dozens of times over the years, but today I saw it differently. It was beautiful, yes, but it seemed cold somehow, imposing rather than welcoming. Richard answered the door himself. He looked terrible, honestly. His eyes were red, his face haggard. He'd aged 10 years since I'd last seen him at Thanksgiving. "Come in," he said quietly. The house was silent. "Where is everyone?" I asked. "Vanessa took the kids to her mother's. They'll be back this evening." He led me to his study, a room I'd never been invited into before. It was lined with books, expensive leather-bound editions that I suspected had never been read, chosen for how they looked rather than what they contained. Richard sat down heavily in his desk chair. He looked at me for a long moment, then put his face in his hands. "I've made a terrible mistake," he said. "I waited." "Christopher came to see me 2 days ago," Richard continued, his voice muffled. "He told me he's quitting his job at my firm. He said he's been miserable for our years, that he only went into finance to please me. but he hates it. He's been hiding an alcohol problem for the past 3 years. He said he wakes up every morning wanting to die. I felt my heart clench. Christopher, that bright boy I'd known, suffering like that. He said the culture I created, the emphasis on success and money and status, it's poisoned him. He said I taught him that his worth is tied to his bank account. And when he struggled with the pressure, when he turned to drinking to cope, he couldn't tell me because he knew I'd see him as weak, as a loser. Richard looked up at me, and tears were running down his face. Ashley left too. She's moving to Oregon with her boyfriend, the attorney Vanessa was so proud of. Except she told us she hates him, that she's been dating him because we approved of his success, but he's unkind and controlling. She said she'd rather start over with nothing than spend another day pretending to be happy in the life we designed for her. Richard, I said softly. And Vanessa, he continued, his voice breaking. Last night, after the kids left, she told me she wants a separation. She said I've become someone she doesn't respect anymore. She said I cut you out of our lives, my own sister, because you didn't meet my standards for success, and she realized she'd enabled that cruelty. She said she's ashamed of who we've become. He stood up, walked to the window. I'm sitting in this big house, surrounded by expensive things, and I'm completely alone. My children don't trust me, my wife doesn't want me, and I destroyed my relationship with my sister, the one person who loved me before I had any of this. I sat there processing all of this. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to say I told you so. But mostly I just felt sad. Sad for Richard, sad for his children, sad for all the years we'd lost to his pursuit of an image that had turned out to be hollow. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Richard turned to face me. Because I need to apologize. Because you were right all along. You chose a life of meaning over a life of accumulation. You chose connection over status, and I mocked you for it. I called you a loser when you were the only one of us who actually understood what mattered. He walked over and knelt in front of my chair, this proud man who never shown vulnerability in his life. I'm sorry, Margaret. I'm so deeply sorry. I hurt you. I rejected you. I let my wife say terrible things to you. I prioritized money and reputation over family and love. And now I've lost everything that actually mattered. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. He'd spent his whole life building a castle, and it had collapsed in days because it had no foundation. What do you want from me, Richard? I asked gently. I don't know if I have any right to ask for anything, he said. But if there's any chance, any possibility that you could forgive me, that we could rebuild our relationship, I want that. I want my sister back. Not because I'm alone and desperate, though I am both of those things, but because I finally understand what I lost. I sat there for a long moment, thinking about hurt and healing, about family and forgiveness. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let him feel the full weight of what he'd done. But I thought about Sarah and little Tommy, about the way small acts of grace could change someone's trajectory. I thought about the values I'd tried to live by all my life, kindness, compassion, understanding. I forgive you, I said finally. Richard's face crumpled and he started to sob, deep wrenching sounds that seemed to come from somewhere he'd kept locked away for decades. I got down on the floor with him and held him while he cried. My younger brother, who I'd protected from. Bullies when we were children. Who I'd comforted through our parents' deaths. Who I'd loved even when he made it very hard to do so. When he finally calmed down, we sat together on the floor of his study, backs against the wall, like we used to sit when we were kids sneaking snacks after bedtime. Forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to normal immediately, I said. You hurt me deeply. You said things that I'll probably always remember. Rebuilding trust takes time. I know, Richard said. I'll do whatever it takes. I want you to understand something, I continued. I love my life. I don't make a lot of money, and I'll probably never own a house or drive a new car. But I've spent my career helping people, making small differences that ripple out in ways I'll never fully know. I've stayed true to my values, even when it would have been easier to chase wealth. I'm proud of the life I've built, and I won't apologize for it anymore. You shouldn't, Richard said. Margaret, you're one of the most successful people I know. I was just too blind to see it. You measure your life in the lives you've touched, in the help you've given, in the kindness you've shown. I measure mine in dollars and square footage. And I'm the one who ended up empty. We sat there as the winter morning light filled the study. Outside, the snow had started again, gentle flakes drifting past the window. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know, Richard admitted. Christopher wants to go to rehab, get help for his drinking. He wants to become a teacher, work with kids. I'm going to support him in that, actually support him this time, not just give lip service while trying to change his mind. Ashley's moving across the country, but she said if I want to rebuild our relationship, I need to start by respecting her choices. So I'm going to do that. And Vanessa? She's right to leave. Richard said quietly. I need to figure out who I am without the performance, without the constant need to prove I'm better than everyone else. Maybe if I can do that, maybe if I can become someone worthy of respect, there's a chance for us. But I don't know. What about your business? Richard laughed, a bitter sound. I'm successful in a field I hate, managing money for wealthy people who want to become wealthier. Christopher leaving made me realize I don't want to do this anymore either. I'm 53 years old, and I've spent my entire adult life chasing something that doesn't actually make me happy. It's not too late to change, I said. It's never too late. He looked at me. Do you really believe that? Yes, I said. I've seen it happen over and over at the library. People at 60, at 70, discovering new passions, starting new chapters. You get to decide who you want to be, Richard. You just have to have the courage to make a different choice. We talked for hours that Christmas morning. Really talked the way we hadn't in years. Richard told me about the pressure he'd felt to succeed after our father died, the fear that he wouldn't be able to provide for his family. I told him about the fulfillment I found in my work, the quiet joy of connecting people with exactly the book they needed. Around noon, Richard asked, "Do you have plans for today, for Christmas dinner?" I was going to make myself a small meal, I said. Nothing special. Would you stay? He asked. Vanessa and the kids won't be back until this evening, but I'd really like to cook something for us. The way we used to when we were young. Nothing fancy, just the two of us. I thought about saying no, about protecting myself from further hurt. But I also thought about the long game of healing. About the fact that bridges are rebuilt one plank at a time. I'd like that, I said. We went into his RMU's kitchen, that showcase room that always seemed more for display than actual use. Richard admitted he couldn't remember the last time he'd actually cooked a meal. Vanessa usually hired caterers for their gatherings. We made it simple: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls. We worked side by side, and it felt like coming home to something I didn't know I'd lost. Richard told stories about his kids when they were small, before the pressure and expectations had complicated everything. I told him about regular patrons at the library, the elderly man who read every book about World War II, the teenage girl who discovered poetry and started writing her own. You really love it, don't you? Richard said, watching me talk. Your work? I do, I said. Every single day I get to help someone. Sometimes it's something small, like finding a recipe book. Sometimes it's something bigger, like last night. I told him about Sarah and Tommy, about the out-of-print book and the little boy who'd lost his parents. Richard was quiet for a moment. That child will remember you for the rest of his life, he said. Years from now, when he's grown, he'll tell people about the librarian who stayed late on Christmas Eve to find his book. That's your legacy, Margaret. Not money or property, but moments like that. That's what I've tried to tell you, I said. Success isn't just one thing. It's not just wealth or status. It's also impact, connection, the difference you make in someone's life. We sat down to our simple meal in his formal dining room, at one end of that long table where I'd been deemed not worthy to sit. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I'm going to make changes, Richard said, real ones. I'm going to figure out what I actually value, what kind of life I want to lead, and I'm going to work on rebuilding relationships with my children, with Vanessa, if she'll have me, and with you. No matter how long it takes. I believe you, I said. And surprisingly, I did. We spent the rest of Christmas afternoon together. Richard showed me old photo albums I hadn't seen in years. Pictures of our parents, of us as children, of Christmases past when we were a family without complications. We laughed at our terrible 1980s hairstyles, at Richard's obsession with Star Wars, at my habit of reading books under the dinner table when I was supposed to be eating. We were happy then, Richard said softly, looking at a picture of the two of us building a snowman. We can be happy again, I said, just differently. Before I left that evening, Richard walked me to my car. The snow had stopped, and the neighborhood was beautiful in that way that only Christmas evening can be, with lights glowing in windows and everything peaceful and still. Thank you for coming, Richard said. Thank you for giving me another chance. We're family, I said simply. That has to mean something. He hugged me, tight and long. Merry Christmas, Margaret. And thank you for never giving up on being exactly who you are. You were right all along. I drove home through the quiet streets, and something had shifted. I didn't feel less alone because my brother had apologized. I felt less alone because I'd finally, fully accepted that my life had value exactly as it was. The next few months were interesting. Richard followed through on his promises. He started therapy, something he'd always dismissed as self-indulgent. He cut back his hours at work and started exploring what else he might want to do with his life. He reached out to Christopher and went to visit him in rehab, where they had hard, honest conversations about the expectations that had nearly destroyed them both. Christopher finished his rehab program and enrolled in a teacher certification program. I was sick. Hard paid for it, and for the first time, it was support given freely without strings attached or judgment. Ashley called me from Oregon. She'd gotten a job at a small nonprofit and was working with homeless youth. I'm making almost nothing, she told me. But Aunt Margaret, I wake up happy. I'm actually helping people. I'm proud of you, I told her, and I meant it. Vanessa and Richard started marriage counseling. She moved back home after 3 months, but with clear boundaries about the kind of life they would build together going forward. They downsized, selling their enormous house and buying something more modest. They started volunteering together at a food bank. One Saturday in March, Richard came to the library. He looked around with genuine interest, seeing it for the first time not as the place his sister wasted her talents, but as the community space it was. Could you use a volunteer? He asked. I'm decent with computers. I thought maybe I could help people with technology questions, setting up email accounts, that kind of thing. I showed him around, introduced him to my colleagues, explained our programs. He started coming in every Saturday morning. I watched him help an elderly woman video chat with her grandson overseas for the first time. I saw the look on his face when she thanked him, told him he'd given her such a gift. Is this what it feels like? He asked me later. When you help someone? Yes, I said. That's exactly what it feels like. I've been missing this my whole life, he said quietly. Spring turned to summer. Richard sold his investment firm to a larger company. With his share of the sale, he set up scholarship funds for students pursuing careers in teaching and library science. He didn't want his name on them. He just wanted to support people choosing service over profit. One evening in June, Richard and Vanessa invited me to DI. Nair. Just the three of us, casual, at their new, smaller house. After we ate, Richard pulled out an old book, the one I'd planned to give him last Thanksgiving. The vintage poetry collection. I found this in my study, he said. You brought it that day, didn't you? When we talked on Christmas. I did, I admitted. It was supposed to be your Christmas gift. He opened it and read one of the poems aloud. Something about choosing the road less traveled. His voice caught at the end. You gave me a greater gift that day, he said. You forgave me when I didn't deserve it. You showed me that it's possible to live a life of meaning without wealth, to be successful without status. You saved my life, Margaret. You really did. That September, we started a new tradition. The first Sunday of every month, we have family dinner. Not fancy catered affairs, but simple meals where we cook together and actually talk. Christopher comes when he can, bringing stories from his classroom. Ashley video calls from Oregon. We laugh and argue and reconnect. We don't pretend the past didn't happen. Richard's words that Thanksgiving still stings sometimes when I remember them. But we're building something new, something more authentic than what we had before. At the library, I started a program called Second Acts, specifically designed for people over 50 who want to explore new interests or career changes. Richard helps me run it, sharing his own story of transformation. We've had dozens of participants, people rediscovering passions they'd set aside, people choosing meaning over money, people realizing it's never too late to become who they were meant to be. Last week, Sarah brought Tommy to the library. He's 9 now, doing better, starting to heal from his loss. He wanted to thank me for the book, but more than that, he wanted to show me that he'd written his own story, inspired by that Christ. Moss Eve. I'm going to be a writer, he told me solemnly. I'm going to write stories that help people feel better, like that book helped me. You're going to be wonderful at that, I told him. After they left, I sat at my desk in the quiet library and thought about legacies. Not the kind measured in dollars or real estate, but the kind measured in lives touched, in small kindnesses that ripple outward, in the courage to live according to your values even when the world tells you they don't matter. I thought about my brother, who'd had to lose everything to figure out what mattered. I thought about his children, finding their way to authentic lives. I thought about all the people who'd come through these library doors over the decades, each one carrying their own struggles and hopes. And I thought about that word Richard had used, loser, how wrong he'd been. How wrong we all are when we measure worth by wealth, success by status, value by visible achievement. I'm 59 years old now. I still live in a small apartment. I still drive an old car. I still work at the library, helping people find what they need, and I have never been richer. Rich in purpose, in connection, in the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. Rich in the knowledge that I stayed true to myself even when it would have been easier not to. This Christmas we'll all gather again, in Richard's modest house, around a table that fits everyone comfortably. We'll cook together, tell stories, remember where we've been, and celebrate where we're going. I'll think about last Christmas, about sitting on the floor with my brother while he cried, about the moment we both realized that we'd been measuring the wrong things all along. I'll think about forgiveness, about second chances, about the courage it takes to admit you were wrong, and the grace it takes to offer understanding instead of judgment. And I'll be grateful for my simple life, for my meaningful work, for my family, who found their way back to what matters. Grateful that I never gave up on being exactly who I am, even when the people I loved suggested I should be ashamed of it. Because here's what I've learned. You're not a loser because you chose service over wealth. You're not a failure because you prioritized meaning over money. You're not less than because you built a quiet life instead of a loud one. Sometimes the greatest success is simply having the courage to be yourself, to live according to your values, to measure your worth by the love you give and the help you offer and the kindness you show. That's my story. That's my revenge, if you want to call it that. Not bitterness or retaliation, but living fully and authentically, proving through my life that there are many ways to be successful, many definitions of a life well lived. And in the end, that's the only revenge that matters. Being happy, being whole, being exactly who you were meant to be. If this story touched your heart, I'd love for you to hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to hear more stories about finding your way, about second chances, and the courage to live authentically. And please, leave a comment below telling me about your own journey, about the moments when you chose meaning over money, or about the times when forgiveness changed everything. Your stories matter, and I'd be honored to read them. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is not determined by your bank account, but by the life you build and the love you share.